You're listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Your favorite source for gaming, film, and internet debate starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sokan Podcast. I'm your host, T, and with me are Jace and Leo.
Jace Dre's son!
And Leo.
We're still trapped in our respective boxes, but we're alive. Self-isolation's been going on for a few weeks, so we don't all have the most exciting stories. But Jace, what's the outside world like?
I have very limited contact with the outside world. However, it does happen. I do get out for work and get to go to fun places where the public, like post offices, and mask up and glove up and see all the crazy people who don't.
I had the opportunity to go into my office for the last time today, for the foreseeable future, to collect my my PC and necessary office supplies so that I can work from home for the foreseeable future. It was a bittersweet goodbye to everybody. I thought I'd be skipping out of there because, hey, I'm working from home. I'm not commuting anymore. But it was like, ooh, well, I'll see you on the other side of this.
Yeah. It's a weird time to be alive. We've been having daily meetings with our management staff, and today we have a tradition of going to birthday lunches when one of our managers has a birthday. There's 10 of us total, so 10 lunches a year. And so one of our managers had a birthday. Obviously, we couldn't go to lunch, so we did a Microsoft Teams happy birthday sing along, and it was abhorrent. It's really hard to get coordinated on that thing.
It is. It really is. I've had a few very awkward Microsoft team meetings, and I don't want to do them ever again, but they're going to be my life for a while.
Yeah, what would we do without Microsoft Teams? I really didn't use it at all before, even though we had access to it with our Office 365. I never used it at all, but I'll tell you what, it's been a real lifesaver.
I've had a couple of people ask me about Discord and some of the programs that we nerdy gamers have used for years. And I was telling some folks, it's super easy to set up. You don't have to pay for it. They're like, you don't have to pay for it?
Yeah,
no,
I almost
don't.
I almost did a work Discord. But since we already had it in our plan and you can do video, it's probably better to be able to see people's faces for work stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you had any of those weird Teams meetings or Zoom meetings where you think you're muted but then you're not, and then you have to try to explain yourself?
Fortunately, not yet. I think I'm about to, because I'm in a house with my two daughters who are going stir crazy, and my wife who's also working from home, and she's coaching autistic children on the spectrum, and it's going to be I can't imagine the things are going to be said in the background of my meetings that I'm going to have. I'm going to be like, hey, sorry, we're all adjusting. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I was on a meeting the other day with which is our association, one of the associations that we're part of, and it was about confidentiality and how to keep sessions private while you're on social media, blah blah blah. And I forgot to mute myself, and they're these people are, I don't know, I don't want to bad talk them because they're great people, but they say like things that they think are super deep. And I wasn't muted, and I quoted Talladega Nights, and I was like, you've got to remember that the field mouse is fast, but the owl sees at night. And this lady goes, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, what was that? I was like, I was just trying to give some insight on exactly how we should respond in moments of crisis.
It's awesome. Like, I'm more worried about, I'm sitting in a serious meeting with, one of our partners, I'm negotiating a contract or something, and my wife is telling, some kid to stop digging in their nose or something. Like in the background, I'm like, yeah. So I think in 2021 we should really consider not digging in our noses.
That is your official recommendation.
It is. It will be.
From the CDC.
All right. We'll put that down in the book. For the rest of today, we're going to be taking a look back at the first season of Picard, discussing laid-back games like the newly released Animal Crossing title, and looking at the actions of celebrities during the quarantine. On March 26th, the Star Trek Picard wrapped its first season. We discussed the first couple of episodes earlier in what our producer Sil has called one of our best arguments of season 4. So now that the show has ended, we're going to talk about whether or not it lived up to expectations set by the early episodes and where it might be going in the future. So, just to start off, a lot of us here haven't seen the show or aren't even Star Trek fans in general. Is this a show worth watching if you're not already into the world?
I think the show does a couple of weird things. So it tries to draw on nostalgia. It makes the show about Picard. They have cameos from other characters like Seven of Nine and Riker. They show up for various episodes, but the story is really not told like the Star Trek of old. So I think they're trying to do a mix of both. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they've missed on both counts. It's uninteresting for me as a former Star Trek fan, particularly The Next Generation. And it's uninteresting to me by just what is the modern storytelling, code. It just isn't interesting to me.
I found it incredibly interesting. Now, I guess the question is really about accessibility. Is this show, is Picard accessible to someone who isn't a Star Trek fan? My answer initially is yes, I think so. I think that you could probably sit down and watch it and understand you're watching a show about an old man who used to be an important captain. You could pick themes relatively quickly. There are obviously some Easter eggs, or even probably a little, I have to use a stronger word than Easter egg. There is some foundational things that would help if you knew about it going in. But I think that they did a good enough job of explaining the world around it, and giving enough background that you wouldn't stay lost for long. A Star Trek fan, for instance, would immediately know when you see the artifact that it's a Borg cube. Other people might take a minute to figure out, some explanation of what is a Borg, why is their ship a cube, and why is it important that this one isn't moving anymore. So, I mean, I think it's accessible. Certainly, I think you'd enjoy it more if you were a Star Trek fan.
Honestly, being a Star Trek fan, I think, so a surface level Star Trek fan, I think somebody who knows like who characters are and knows a little bit about Star Trek lore would appreciate like cameos and what a Borg cube is. But folks who like have been fans for a while or like know really deep Star Trek lore, especially loved the way the stories used to be told, I think the more you dug into it, the less you're gonna like it, because it hits some notes, it hits some elements of like, yep, this was a character that we knew and they have these kind of weird relationships, but those aren't necessarily the things that always shine through in the show. They even contradict a lot of the previously established Star Trek lore in trying to create this, quote, compelling story. And a lot of stuff is just absent.
I could not disagree more. I think I'm probably in like the top 2% of Star Trek nerds. There's no piece of Star Trek that I have not seen, probably multiple times. Every episode, every movie, I've read books and books and books of Star Trek novelizations. Now those aren't necessarily canon, but most of them are not. I've read them anyway. I feel incredibly enmeshed in the Star Trek mythos. I ran a Star Trek simulation online for about 2.5 years, where I was an admin and a captain of my own vessel, the USS Hawking. Feel free to Google it. And incredibly rich. I loved the layers of lore. Now, I do have some complaints about the show, sure, and I feel like we're going to get to them with the questions, but I found it deep. And as far as canon breaking, I don't think so. Star Trek has a history of breaking its own canon and then working around to fix it. That's not new. That has happened since Next Generation came out. Actually, internal canon was busted in the original series. And then if you want to count animated series as canon, which evidently we do now, there are ways to fix canon breaches, and I think that if you're working around some continuity in order to tell a good story, it's worth it, especially if you fix it on the other side. For instance, the Klingons in the original series did not have ridge heads. The Next Generation brought out a complete and total Klingon redesign. Star Trek fans of the era were not happy that Klingons got a redesign, but because of prosthetic technology, because we've progressed as a society, because we wanted more deeper special effects, they gave us new Klingons. Well, Enterprise had a whole storyline about why some Klingons were flat-headed and some were ridge-headed. They built an entire storyline around it and fixed that little piece of continuity. It's not a continuity error as much as it's just a production difference. A lot of people do not like the way the Klingons look now in Discovery, for instance. There are some continuity fixes that they did in season 2 to fix some of the stuff in season 1. I'm okay with fixing continuity as long as at the end of the day we get some sort of cohesion.
Cohesion's fine. I'm happy with a story that comes back around on itself to rectify where it might have made, not necessarily a mistake, that's too strong a word, but might have made what some might consider, a continuity error or break, or disregarding or contradicting something that had been, previously established. I think there are a lot of examples of things where, in some ways, it's kind of impressive how the writers for Picard have managed to adhere to some of the nuances of previous stories, but in a lot of ways they've just completely disregarded them for the sake of whatever the story is. Like characters that are 180s of themselves. 7 of 9, for instance, is one who is like, she was cold and calculating and logical, and now she's a drunken alcoholic mercenary, like a completely different kind of character. And it's my same argument for Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. Like, it's fine if you want to have a character make that kind of transition, but you have to justify it. You have to earn it.
I would love to see a Star Trek Fenris Rangers show. That would actually thrill the heck out of me. So I don't disagree in the sense that I would like to see it. But I also don't necessarily have a problem. There's a difference between moving a character forward and taking apart what made the character that character in the first place. When we met 7 of 9, she was just disengaged from the Borg. She had just become separated from the collective. One of the big themes of the show is about Borg being separated from the collective and what that does to them and the trauma that they endure. She was highly traumatized during Voyager, having been assimilated as a child. We actually see a human being who came from a traumatized, separated Borg to what would happen when they get put back in the real world. 20 years went by, and this is what became of her. Do I miss that story? Yeah, but I think I would have hated it worse if they would have left her as a cold, calculating, half cyborg being that didn't alter or change at all in the intervening years. I'm happy to see some progression.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'd like to see characters that have progressed, but I would have liked to have seen some kind of throwback to that old character, as opposed to just it's the same actress, but it is a fundamentally different character that has the same name. In a lot of ways, it's the same as Jean-Luc, or my criticisms of Jean-Luc, but I think we're going to get to that.
Funnily enough, it's the next question. Do you think that adaptation stayed true to the character of Jean-Luc Picard?
I get the character has aged, I get the character's been through some trauma, and I get the character has been disillusioned to a point. but this has been a season of Picard essentially being insulted and chastised and told off over and over and over, and him being this sorry, so you're gonna have to edit it, but him being just this. Picard was the guy who said, this is the line, no further. Like, Picard was a commander, and he was a commander for a long time. And to see this sad old character be pushed around like he is over and over and over, to me really is a fundamental departure from the Starfleet captain and eventual Starfleet admiral that I admired. I feel bad for this old man.
I guess maybe from where I am in my life, I found it to be very compelling. And I will acknowledge 100% that there is a change from All Good Things, the final episode. Well, let's say Nemesis, Stark Nemesis, which was actually the last time we saw him in universe, to season 1, episode 1 of Picard. There is a vast difference. And I kind of related to it. There, even in the very first episode, there was a kind of a brokenness in Picard, a disillusionment with the universe and the world, and I identified with it because I find I'm not obviously not a Starfleet captain, sadly, but I'm an idealist.
Sadly.
And I'm an idealist, and I believe in making decisions based on principles, and I believe the world can be a better place, and I believe that ultimately good will come if we all work hard and do the right thing. This last year, maybe year and a half or so, I've been seeing so much of what I have poured my life into in the real world not pay dividends, and the goodness that I expect doesn't come around, and there is a sense of disillusionment in me. And I'm not as old as Picard. I didn't have necessarily a grand career before I have been moving into that place, but there is a certain cynicism that comes with spending yourself and spending your idealistic capital to make a better world, only to see that world not get better, and in some cases get worse. In some ways, there is a pain to that, and it is sad to see. I think that it was sad for all of us to see Picard resigned to the fate that he was living. On top of that, he's sick. All Good Things set up the plot, the fact that he had that brain condition that would eventually kill him, but before that, take away his mind and faculties. This is alluded to in the very first episodes, and then Deanna Troi makes kind of an emotional mention of it, and we know that this Picard is not only older, not only disillusioned, but he's also sick. This is a different man because he's dealing with health issues, and that's a reality for people as they get older. Decline happens, and while I get what you're saying, it would have been really triumphant to see an old man Picard jump back on the bridge and be that guy we wanted him to be. It also wouldn't have felt real. It wouldn't have felt like it mattered. And to me, Trek has always been about stuff that matters. It's always been about talking about the human condition, and getting older and getting disillusioned and failing is really a part of being human.
It totally is. And in fact, I think what Star Trek was about, the fundamental aspects about being human, were I think also one of the largest departures of this show, at least in terms of where I think Gene Roddenberry was hoping to take it. This is a reinvestment into the failings of humanity, and not only a reinvestment, but a highlighting of it and making them the sole cause for this story. The whole universe is flawed in such a way that humanity itself is awful, and Picard is supposed to be this one shining light of humanity. Well, that wasn't the idea of Star Trek. While yes, Picard was a shining beacon of humanity, he was so because he embodied those ideals. This is a complete departure from that, and he is instead this doddering old man who was an idealist, who is now confused and lost most of the time, and then has moments of clarity to have some quavering idealistic speech amidst all the evil and darkness and chaos that is humanity's worst highlighted as all that humanity has amounted to in this show. And that is it's not just a departure from Gene Roddenberry's vision. It is the polar opposite of what was Gene Roddenberry's vision, in my opinion.
No. Wrong. So you're right. Gene Roddenberry originally did not want to have conflict within his characters. He wanted the conflict to be outside of the characters. He did want to present a humanity that had evolved, moved on. And the original series and the first couple seasons of TNG while he was alive had very strict rules about what had to happen. However, that stuff went away. That stuff went away in late TNG, DS9 it was gone, and subsequent treks after that, it really fell away. That piece of
once he died and his vision was no longer adhered to.
Right, but that was only part of the vision that humanity had ascended. First of all, in Picard, the big bads aren't even human. It really is about alien bad guys.
I will disagree there completely. The Federation is the worst.
Wrong. Did you see the final episode? Federation came through, dog.
Well, certain captains in the Federation came through.
There was like 80 ships that showed up in the fleet.
All identical CGI copy paste ships. Yes.
Well, they were there. Federation showed up, and honestly, what was corrupt in the Federation wasn't even a human thing. It was a Romulan thing, which is right up the Romulan alley. It was a huge Romulan conspiracy that had embedded itself within Starfleet Command. Sure, but that's not new. Even Roddenberry signed off on stories as long as it came from the outside. You corrupt Starfleet. One of the early TNG episodes where the alien embedded themselves into the skulls of the people that had the little breathing tube. He allowed that to happen because it was the aliens that had corrupted Starfleet. Same thing happened on Picard. Ultimately, it wasn't the humans that were the bads. The Romulans were the bads. The synths were the bads. Now, that's not to say there weren't departures. Sure, there is inner conflict in Star Trek now. Characters can be more characters rather than just vehicles for telling a story, and I personally appreciate that. I'm fine with allowing characters to be characters and have flaws and have things that they struggle with.
I think it's the complete opposite. I think now these characters are simply there to move a plot along, regardless of how much they compromise their previous selves, or even in what weird way.
No, that was really my point. I do think that there's a difference in storytelling from the 60s, 80s, and today that we must be, obliged to. There's dynamics that have to happen for a story to still be relevant. And does the formula still work? I don't know. I really don't. The closest thing we have to the old formula would be the Seth MacFarlane show, Orville. Now, even that show has a lot of human flaw in it, so it's not necessarily directly attached to Gene Roddenberry's original rules around Trek, which he did have some rules. But to me, Star Trek has always been more about real life to the art and reflect something back that you can learn from. And to me, Picard did that and did it really well. I don't mind showing the flaws in our culture and our society through the sci-fi lens. In fact, I actually really like that, and I think that that's what makes Trek. I think that's what Gene's ultimate goal was, to show us that we could.
I do think the difference therein is, of course, showing the failings of a society through the lens of someone in the future who has surpassed it, moved on, and can look back on it objectively, and can paint moral dilemmas to an audience without being preachy or heavy-handed about it. That's what the old Star Trek was good at, and that Picard has ultimately failed to do. It's the opposite of that. It's incredibly preachy. It tells you what's right or wrong, and then decides for you what's wrong with humanity and tries to show you.
I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all.
In the final act of finale, the titular character, Jean-Luc Picard, he died?
He died.
Yeah, he died.
Okay. Yeah, apparently he straight up died and was resurrected as a synthetic person?
That's what happened.
Is that driving the plot forward, or a good call for the show, or?
I mean, it's good for the show that now live, I guess, but ultimately this was one of my big problems with the show. If I was going to say my number one it would be this decision, and whoever wrote it should be knives and noodles. Plot, does it drive the plot forward? Well, there can still be a plot because the Star Trek Picard still has Picard in it for season 2. Did it need to happen? No. Why did it happen? Who knows? Would Picard have wanted that to happen? No. I just really thought it was I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why it occurred. I mean, even philosophically, now you have to ask yourself, is this really Picard? If you take the memory of a person and put it into a robot, is that still the person, or is the person gone and now it's this new thing? I don't know. And personally, I'm not excited to ask that question. This was my big F- for the show, was the decision to make Picard a synth.
So yeah, it made him a synth, and I totally agree. The idea that Jean-Luc had to die to come back as a memory of that in another body, and to still try and play it off like it's the same character, so that the same actor can continue drawing on people's nostalgia, so they'll keep watching this garbage show.
It's not garbage. It's a good show.
It made me like it less.
You didn't even like it at all in episode 1.
No, I didn't like it, and I like it less now.
An article by Keith Phipps on Vulture claims that although the finale tied up loose ends at, quote, warp speed, end quote, they did so in a way that was true to the heart of Star Trek. You guys don't quite agree.
That is a safe bet.
It depends on what you're talking about. There were a lot of plot points that happened, and I do have to say that apart from the Picard synth thing, everything else I thought was beautiful. I loved the moments that they gave us throughout the series and throughout the season. The episode that was Deanna and Riker was incredibly touching and tearjerker, even type of an episode. It was so well written, so well acted. The chemistry between those actors was still just golden. It actually made me sad for instead of having that we didn't get a TNG part 2, because I would have loved to see these characters interact more. But there were a lot of loose ends that did get tied up relatively quickly. For the most part, I was okay with where it came out. I liked the fact that humanity stood up for the right thing at the end. I liked that the synths were redeemable in the end. I liked the fact that they gave Data a real send-off, a real kind of funeral moment, and let him go off into the gray mists appropriately. There were a lot of things I liked.
Picard is already confirmed to be getting a second season. Though no official air date has been announced, CBS is looking to have it released by late 2020 to early 2021. If you're looking for more Star Trek content, nowhere else to turn. Star Trek Online now hosts another Sokan Guild. The Nova Star Task Force is ready and waiting. Animal Crossing, Terraria, Stardew Valley, RimWorld, Minecraft. A lot of these games are gaining popularity recently, or have been stalwart members of the I don't know what else to do with my time, in the case of Minecraft, and they all have one major thing in common. They're based around relaxation. While each of these games comes with some form of conflict, in some cases optional or perhaps even minimal, each of these games is what players consider to be relaxed in theme. Slice of life, if you will. Do you think that these games are getting popular specifically because for people's real lives right now? And if not, what would you say is?
I don't think these games have been pretty popular for a while now. Most of them. I think Animal Crossing is the one that was not really on my radar until the quarantine life. But like Minecraft was huge for a long time. Terraria, I've had lots and lots of friends who played it. Stardew Valley, even I downloaded it. RimWorld, like all of these have been in the consciousness of gamers for a while. I think that when you have downtime, you kind of go back to those things that maybe you just touched on, or you found relaxing at fun in one time, or you thought, hey, this needs more time and I don't have more time, but now I do, so now I can do it. I don't necessarily think it's a discovery as much as maybe a rediscovery, or maybe just feeling boredom.
I think it definitely has something to do with our current global situation. I know for me personally, I tend like I have really enjoyed Terraria, Stardew Valley. I'm actually playing RimWorld now, and of course, Animal Crossing is on everybody's radar now. But we talked a little bit about last episode about how forms of entertainment aren't necessarily, they don't hold the same kind of appeal that they might have in the past. And I know for me, I typically really like games that are a little more action oriented, that are I don't know, a little bit more hectic. There are a couple games like Vermintide, or there's a game Hunt Showdown that is a kind of a horror / PvP game that I have really enjoyed playing with some of our friends, but I don't enjoy them as much right now. The same as I haven't enjoyed movies like Bird Box or Dawn of the Dead, or like other, I don't know, things that used to get my adrenaline going a little bit, that I have enjoyed. I don't as much anymore. And I've leaned on games like RimWorld and Stardew Valley here lately because they distract me from what is the unsettling reality of our world.
Yeah.
Brain wants serotonin, not adrenaline.
Mine does, for sure.
A lot of gamers consider these casual games to be just mainstream or important as massive titles like Call of Duty. Do you guys think that that's the case?
I don't know. I have a hard time with the word mainstream, regardless of context. I mean, even if you, like, whatever you put at the end of that, media, games, movies, I don't know. I have a hard time defining what mainstream even is. I think especially given the connectivity that everybody seems to have nowadays, with the ubiquitousness. I don't know if that's ubiquity is the word. Whatever the word is. Of all of our relative connection to each other via the internet, via our cell phones, via, whatever we have. I don't know. Some things become massively popular and some things don't. But even those things that don't tend to be massively popular tend to have millions of people who pay attention to them. And Candy Crush can be considered a mainstream game by that standard, as much as I don't want to.
It's an interesting point that mainstream is almost meaningless and moot in a society like we have now, where everything is so interconnected and interwoven. It's almost like there's just a bunch of niches that have gotten a lot bigger that have some Venn diagram quality to them. There's some overlap on these niches. There's not really one thing that everybody is putting their thumb on to say this is the mainstream, and there's not really anything like counterculture anymore because everybody's a little bit counterculture these days. I have less of a problem with that word than I do important, mainly because I don't know that, are video games important? I don't know. I don't know that that's a good thing to call them.
They are my life.
Certainly I treat them like, in my life, I have treated them important. I have put them above more important things. I have skipped meals or even skipped work in my life before to play a video game. So in that sense, sure, it's important. But I don't know. These labels become less meaningful as we all kind of become more open-minded to what gaming is. And as resistant as I want to be to that sometimes, I think that's just what we're going to have to accept, that the gamer tag isn't what it used to be. It's not counterculture. It's not, in the basement with the box of Cheetos. It's different now, and that's okay, and that's probably better for all of us.
I'm gonna go a little PC master race here. Surprise, surprise. But I think because we have seen certain outlets, I'll throw Steam a bone here and say that through outlets like Steam, I've been exposed to games by indie developers and by really small teams of developers that I otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to. And instead, if I was, let's say I was a console peasant and all I played were console games, the only games I would know would be Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed or, you know, um, first or third person shooters with stealth elements. Like that, those would be the only games I would ever really know. But because I have exposure to these other things, there are so many other games and other genres that are important to me. Important, I guess, is a weird word, but they've been really fun for me.
Like
And I
genital
know-
jousting. I mean, would we ever know genital jousting if we only
We
played
wouldn't.
on the Xbox?
For those of you who haven't played it, look it up. It's worth it. But those really are the kinds of niche games that are really fun and that you can toss around to, the communities that you're a part of and get a little bit more exposure that other people will also jump into. Stardew Valley is popular because gamers have really enjoyed it and have tossed it out to other gamers. It's not a huge development company that made Stardew Valley, and yet most gamers I talk to are familiar with it, or at least know of it.
I will say, console peasantry aside, there is the consoles are catching up a little bit in their marketplaces. There are a lot more ways to be exposed to games in the consoles now than there used to be, 5-10 years ago. You really can come across more titles that aren't let's use the word mainstream titles, where you used to have to go buy the disc or whatever. There is a little more indie to what you can play on a console.
Yeah, it's better now, but I don't think it's anywhere near where we have the luxury of
Certainly not like
access.
Steam. Absolutely not, where you can actually have a curator curate games through their massive library. And you've played this, you'd probably like this.
Yeah, it really is world changing for folks who value games.
So, question: what makes these games different from mobile games?
Because I'm on my PC.
There is just literally a different attitude when to me anyway. It's hard. I guess I'm gonna be snobby here. It is different than me flipping open my phone, and while I'm in the doctor's
Flipping
office.
open your phone.
Listen, I have my phone has a flip top because it's also my wallet. It's not a flip phone. I have an iPhone, but it has a case, so I have to flip open the case in order to play it.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
but like it's in the doctor's office to pass some time is different than whenever I get, a 6-pack and a bag of Doritos and come sit at my desktop. Like there's a different mentality there. On the one hand, I'm passing the time. On the other hand, I'm going to game. So mobile gaming, to me, from my perspective, is really about passing time, whereas gaming on my PC or even console for that matter, there really is everything else in the world is stopping. This is what I'm doing right now.
That's a good distinction. I agree with that. I also think another fundamental element is kind of what are these games designed to achieve? And when you look at mobile gaming, especially the quote free games that you can download, like they typically have some element of gameplay that you can participate in up to a point. And there's either things that are on a timer that you can pay money to cancel the timer, or there are really fundamental elements of the game that you can't pass beyond without having to pay for them. I think where some PC games have been lambasted for putting those elements in their games, mobile games have not only embraced it but have mastered it and are like there seems to be no pushback on mobile games for it. I don't see any kind of counterculture for mobile gaming to not include those elements, because I don't think anybody takes those games seriously. And I think ultimately when folks look at who's paying for those, like everybody else just kind of crosses their arms and says, yep, you deserve it. Whereas PC games are different. People look at those and go, nope, we don't want that. And there's enough of a pushback that developers who do that kind of stuff for PC games develop a negative reputation.
So how often do you guys play these chill games yourselves?
I'm I actually had to pause RimWorld to do this podcast, so a lot.
I don't. The ones on this list are not on my chill list personally. I have played them in the past, but I think I've moved on. Right now, the game that's on my chill list is I believe it's called Dawn of Man, and it's kind of like a city builder
That's on my wish
slash.
list.
Yeah, it's a good game. Like it's a city builder slash resource management slash progress through time. Maybe a little bit of RTS, but not like super light RTS. That's not really the point of it. But that's the game I've been kind of escaping into lately, and I try to play, a little bit every day just so that I can unwind. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes my Xanax gets to me first, and I pass out to Cheers reruns. But that's mine pretty often.
I'll say they're games that I keep on my list. They're not games that I play terribly regularly. They're games that I find I go to just shy of a Xanax. Like I'll go to them if I'm stressed or I just need a reprieve. And lately I've been playing the hell out of RimWorld every day.
I've been playing that too, but it's a little different in my community.
Is it?
Just a little bit.
In times like these, perhaps it's good that we have games like this that can give us a more relaxed setting to live in than what the real world currently is like. And to our Animal Crossing friends in the audience, together we can stop the eco-terrorism of Zipper the Bunny Day Bunny. Down with Zipper. Can we say that?
I'm not a console peasant. I don't know what that even means.
The state of the world right now is affecting a lot of people in some pretty negative ways. As per usual, in times of genuine crisis, people are mad at celebrities on social media. A lot of celebrities have been avidly talking about or posting their own suffering in the pandemic for a variety of reasons. But do you guys think it's fair to say that they're suffering the same way the general public is?
So I'm one of those people who has a general disdain for celebrity. I don't know if that's surprising to anybody, but it is. I think the idea that celebrities, and by celebrity, I'm referring more to the quote millionaire celebrity, not the, YouTuber meme celebrity. I'm talking about the folks who are in their mansions, who are recording themselves, quote, suffering because only half their staff showed up today. Those folks are not, I don't know, quote, suffering like the general public is. The truth is, quarantine isn't that hard. It's just boring. Most people are just dealing with boredom. And these folks happen to be dealing with that a little bit less than the rest of us. So no, I've got no pity for celebrities, and I detest them. Surprise, surprise.
I don't detest them. I think that when it's strange to me that a lens is placed on celebrities when it comes to things that really normal people should be the ones that get to opinions and run a show. It comes into a really sharp relief in a situation like this. However, people with wealth don't suffer in the same way as the rest of us, or poor people or homeless people, ever. It's a different ball of wax, regardless of whether or not there is a pandemic going on. The pandemic just shines a light on what already exists: the inequality, the unfairness, the absolute disrespect for human life that doesn't necessarily have a well-padded bank account. So, are they suffering in their perspective? Sure. Their lives have changed, and their reality is shifted, and they are confined and bored. And do I feel sorry for them? No, not necessarily. I feel sorry for all of us. We're all in this together, and we as humanity need to have a little shared compassion for one another. Have they lost their jobs? Maybe. Uh, will it affect their bottom line? A little. Are they going to go hungry? No. Do they have a tennis court on grounds? Yes. It's hard to compare, but I really think this is a problem that exists, period. It doesn't have anything to do with a quarantine or not.
You have such a big heart, Jace, and it makes me warm. It also makes me all the more cynical in response to your soft-heartedness to these terrible human beings. I get that a lens is placed on celebrities by some subgroup of the populace because they like to hear what celebrities think. They hang on the words of celebrities. But the truth is, a lot of celebrities are also putting lenses on themselves. They can't stand to not be the center of attention, and they cannot stand for the idea that they're not being listened to go by. Madonna put out a video of her in her bathtub with like some kind of milky water with flower petals in it, and she's going on about how the coronavirus, I mean, it doesn't care how much money you make. It doesn't care how much talent you have. It doesn't care how important you are. Like, yeah, that's the point, you idiot. Everyone is suffering here, and you're not actually suffering in your flower petal laden bathtub, you dolt. And that is what I take issue with. Get out of the public eye. Nobody wants to hear you lament about how only half your staff showed up today. Don't do it.
I think that the truth doesn't bear that out. I think people do want to hear it. The millions of views on these channels and on these accounts, social media accounts, proves that people do want to hear it for whatever reason. Do I like it? No. Do I think that they have something special to say on the topic? They have as much to say as I do, because once again, we're all in this together. I think that there are some celebrities that are doing good. I believe it was Oprah who donated 10 mil. John Krasinski, I mentioned this last week, his Good News show on YouTube is just heartwarming. And, you know, why not? If you've got a platform, I do think you have a responsibility to use that platform for good. Where it goes awry is when people who of means, regardless of whether you're a celebrity or not, when people of means try to cast their suffering as something other than a minor inconvenience. It's sort of like the first world problem thing. When you encounter people who really struggle day to day to day to day, it's insulting for this. When you look at some of the struggles of, say, the
Totally.
Kardashians, for instance,
Totally.
there is a disgust towards, like, come on, you're not hungry, or if you are, you chose to be because you're trying to be 87 pounds on camera.
I'm going to ask you to stop being so reasonable, Jace, and join me in my hate.
I don't hate them, though. I mean, like, a lot of celebrities I love. I really do. I think that there's a lot of celebrities who do a lot of good things with the platform and the voice they've been blessed with. And if ever I were a celebrity, I hope that I would do the same.
Some celebrities, generally those that tend comedy, have been putting out feel-good messages for people to stay healthy and happy despite the pandemic. Do you think that these might be helping at all, or?
I've enjoyed some of them. I'm also embarrassed to say it because I'm afraid Leo's going to throw his headset at me. But, like, for instance, Jack Black of Jablinski Gelms. I'm a huge Jack Black fan anyway, believe it or not. His style of humor just makes me giggle. He's quarantined. Now, he's quarantined in a mansion with a pool and, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of music equipment, and he's got it better than most. But he's making us feel good. He's making us laugh, and there is a certain sense of shared experience when I know, you know, some of the same feelings and struggles I'm dealing with, he's dealing with. There is a little bit of camaraderie there, despite the fact that it's. See, I guess my big thing here is There's no difference between every day when we don't have a pandemic, between how much money they have and how much I don't, and how much the people poorer than me really don't have. And I confront that kind of thing every day. People who don't literally have enough money for food. So it's always offensive to me when someone can buy 3 yachts and someone else can't afford a Whataburger. Like, that's always wrong. This isn't any different than normal life. This is just a little bit more stark because of the circumstances I get. But, that's what they do. That's what the hand they were dealt, and I guess we can be pissed at them or let them entertain us. And I guess I choose to be entertained.
I think the difference in my perspective is not necessarily that they have and others have not. I don't begrudge them having made it. I don't begrudge them even the weird talents that might have led to their success. We're in a strange time. I think the last 100 years have been the weirdest when it comes to what can make a person wealthy. It's been nuts. If you're funny with political commentary, you can run a late night TV show and you can become a millionaire. That is a weird talent. And I don't begrudge the people who have made a success of that and have, found themselves at the forefront of our collective 1%. I applaud those who have taken their celebrity and have tried to channel it to make other people's lives better. I don't take issue with that. At least those who have done it in a respectful way. Those who have tried to be humorous. Conan O'Brien, for instance. I think one of the things I sent that kind of spurred this question even existing was his critique of a lot of the various celebrity selfies and celebrity tangents, where he made fun of the celebrities who were taking tours through their mansions just arbitrarily and making asses of themselves with trying to relate to a population in quarantine, in 1-bedroom apartments, in their ridiculous mansions. Like, he went to the fake helipad of his place, and he went to the fake second hallway outside the what's a falcon room or a bird whatever it is,
Aviary.
Aviary, yes. Like, he went to the aviary of his house, and it was all like terrible backgrounds that he was like fake walking through, but he was making fun of the celebrities who lack such self-awareness. And the truth is, Conan is another millionaire. He's another guy who has those things or could have those things, but he has enough self-awareness to at least mock those who lack it. And I can appreciate that in somebody like Conan. Jack Black is another celebrity who I respect for his down-to-earth perspective and his self-awareness. There's a ton of celebrities that I appreciate for that. A lot, though, have shown just how unaware they are of the fact that there's a wide world out there that does not enjoy the kind of lifestyle they take for granted.
One of the biggest sources of anger right now is at the Kardashians, who started selling $60 crisis kits to people in need, which were basically just masks and blankets that are extremely upcharged. There have been other cases of price gouging like this with there was the one guy who bought 7,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. How do you guys feel about people that are trying to make a profit off of this crisis?
Let me just say, so I do a lot of business with some office retailers, and so I'm in contact with their sales reps. Do you know that someone tried to sell me a gallon of hand sanitizer for $120? Like, literally called like they were doing me a favor. It's disgusting. It's gross. The Kardashians specifically are some of those people that I kind of can get in Leo's bandwagon for, because I don't feel like the Kardashians are in any way talented humans. They don't necessarily provide a service or a show or anything redeemable that made them wealthy. There was a time when you had to be talented to be celebrity, to be rich, or now it's kind of people are celebrity just for the sake of celebrity. And this is a family who I feel has cashed in on that turn of culture. They've done so very successfully. I'm not saying that they're poor business people, because they very geniusly positioned themselves to make themselves extremely wealthy. I don't approve of that. I don't think that that's a good way to build a culture. But the fact that they would try to sell crisis kits at upcharge is nauseating.
Nauseating is a word I would use too. The Kardashians are a prime example of everything Jace said. They're famous because they're famous. The difference between the guy who bought up all that hand sanitizer and tried to sell it is the guy's a relative nobody who thought he was going to take advantage of a particular crisis and he was going to turn around and be like an entrepreneur. Now, it's possible the guy didn't know the depths of the crisis. He didn't understand the realities of the pandemic. And yes, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that I'm not affording the Kardashians, and I'm okay with that. But the guy found himself in a tight spot. He's even been interviewed before saying like, yeah, this was a bad call. Amazon stopped him. There are forces at play that prevented this guy from capitalizing on his taking advantage of the situation. Nothing is going to stop the Kardashians from taking advantage of this. And that is all based on their fame and popularity. Enough people are going to badmouth them, sure, but that's only going to be press for them. And that's only going to increase popularity for them because they have some kind of crazy rabid fan base that's going to continue buying this garbage because they think it's, quote, better because it costs more money.
But really, you can't really blame the celebrity for that. The problem is in the culture.
I blame the celebrity for taking advantage of it. I blame the celebrity for not having the self-awareness or the moral fortitude to do the right thing.
I think that the onus lies a lot more on the culture and the people. If we didn't elevate these people to these positions, they wouldn't have the ability to do it. The power that they have, we give them.
If you were in this position of celebrity, you would absolutely not do this.
I'm not saying that they're people of good character. That's not what I'm saying. I think that ultimately the bottom line is we elevated someone of poor character to a place where they could be billionaires and abused their status. We did not have to do that as a culture. They provided nothing to us. There was no song they wrote. There was no movie that they presented to us. There was nothing they produced other than just a sex tape and then capitalizing on it. And then people threw money at them. It's not their fault people threw money at them. It's the people's fault for throwing the money.
I think that were you in their position, you would not do this. But I think, and I love you for it, you have such a heart that you don't hold them to the same standard you would hold yourself to.
I don't know. I'm no Kardashian apologist by any means. I hate them. I'm not saying I don't. I'm not a golden child here. I'm not the Saint.
No, but
Christopher.
You would never do what you are forgiving them for.
It's not a forgiveness. It's where does the responsibility lie? Where does the fault lie? The fault lies with a culture that celebrated what they offered. If we didn't celebrate that, they would be nothing. We did this.
I think they're both to blame, though. I think the culture is partly to blame, but I also hold them 100% accountable for taking advantage of this cult of personality that exists around them. They are still to blame.
It's kind of like the trolley problem, where there's like 5 people tied to this train track and 1 person on the other. You can flip the switch to move the trolley, but if you do, you're responsible for the 1 person's death. The answer to the morality of that problem isn't ever it's your fault because you flipped a switch or didn't. It's the fault of the person that tied the people to the tracks.
It's deep tea.
And the fault of the person who didn't put brakes on the trolley.
Or faulty brakes, or didn't warn you that there were people tied, or yes.
Yeah, So, like, I'm not gonna say that the average person is guilty in this because I don't know that there's enough like weight there, but I definitely see where the cultural weight is coming into play, and then they're taking advantage of it, which is understandable. If humans are a little bit opportunistic by nature, it just kind of feels like it got out of hand fast, and it's going to continue to get out of hand. But on the bright side, if you do have someone trying to price gouge in your area, that is illegal.
I don't
People are
know.
the worst. It's just a mantra I live by.
Sometimes they really are.
We're a terrible species, but we make some great things. For example, as a more uplifting note, not all rich and famous people are evil. The CEO of Delta, Ed Bastian, gave up a portion of his own salary to avoid having to lay off employees. Kevin Love, JJ Watts, and Kelia Ohai are actively donating money to families in need. Even Britney Spears has been active on social media, speaking directly to her fans to comfort them, sending money and food to those in need, and otherwise spreading awareness for charities that are trying to help people. Hozier has notably been giving at-home concerts that have been streamed to help people relax and find other things to focus on during the crisis. Do you think that it's the responsibility of these celebrities, people with power and fame, to do things like this?
Yes, I do think that. I am a huge Spider-Man fan, and with great power comes great responsibility. If you have the means to make a situation better, then you're an if you don't do it. You have to do what you can. You can't fix everything, but there are things that all of us can do. And if you can do it, you should do it. That is our moral responsibility to take care of each other. And so, there's different value of things. Giving $10 million is certainly better than giving a free concert. But if you can give a free concert, that makes some people feel better. And that's something you can do in these moments.
Let me just say that while I 100% agree, with great power comes great responsibility. And those people who have power, particularly these folks who are CEOs of organizations or those who have direct influence and authority over the financial lives of others, yes, they should be going out of their way to make the lives of those they're responsible for easier. I'm very fortunate to work for an organization whose leadership has gone out of their way to ensure we remain employed and we remain paid for however long that can last. I'm grateful to the leadership of the company that I work for. I work for this company because I knew that that was a reality of our culture. Celebrities have a little bit of a different kind of power, a little bit of a different kind of authority. I do think the idea of, I don't know, whether they have a responsibility to this or not, I'm not sure. Celebrity's a weird thing, and it comes in gradients, and it's, I'm famous in this aspect or not. The things that you can offer, I do agree with Jace, yes. Offer what you can to try and comfort those in need. But I also think that it needs to be tempered with a self-awareness.
It's hard. I saw an interview recently with Justine Bateman. Now that's a name from the past, isn't it? About how her reality was skewed because of how she came up, and how truly the world, her perception of what the real world was broken because of her fame and because of her massive amount of fame. She has since grown up and has since come to realize what the world is more about, and has changed perspective. But to me, you have to give a little bit of understanding to people who, if that is your reality, if that is your perception, and you are lost in it, then really the response, rather than anger, I feel, should be pity, because it is important that people understand what is real and what isn't real. And when you lose yourself in worship to something that isn't real, you really aren't living. Now, it's hard to say someone's not living. I'd love to not live on a yacht myself, but there is something to be said for people who celebrity and fame is somewhat of a prison. There are lots and lots of stories and movies and books about famous people who are miserable in their fame because it's like a gilded cage. And I think that there's probably a great deal of truth to that. If And it does probably make them come off as tone deaf to people who are a little more dialed in and tuned into what the real world is really about. But it doesn't make me necessarily mad. It makes me frustrated, but again, more at a culture that allows it rather than the individuals who are lost to it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It all comes down to individual perspective, and it all comes down to not only how self-aware are you, but how culturally aware are you. And the truth is, there are remarkably intelligent and socially aware people who are celebrities. And to them, I applaud their efforts to try and make the world a better place. There are also remarkably self and socially aware people who are not of means, who are also trying to make the world a better place, and I applaud them for the things that they're able to do. There are also idiots, effing idiots, who are celebrities. And to them, they could die in a fire, and I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, it's sad for the people that their loss made sad, but whatever. The world's not a worse place. And there are effing idiots who are not famous. And yeah, that's just the reality of humanity. So it is what it is. I don't begrudge all celebrities. I just begrudge the ridiculously wealthy and remarkably tone deaf and completely unaware folks who believe that they're contributing to some quote greater good by sharing their idiocy across the cosmos, by dropping their non-issues into the World Wide Web through whatever means they think are best. And the ones that think they're helping are the ones who make me detest them more.
To close this off, we've talked about the people of the entertainment industry, how they're handling things, but we also like to talk about entertainment itself. It's kind of the whole purpose of the podcast. I don't know if you guys might have noticed. But in times like these, entertainment in all its forms is kind of all we got to keep us sane. Whether that's video games, movies, TV, it's kind of all we got to do while we're stuck at home unless you want to, play Uno. Do you feel that this mess proves that these art forms are important to a society?
Yes. Is that a good enough answer?
I heard Carter typing like Matt. I agree. Yes. I think they're important. They are increasingly important when other things become less important. I don't know how to phrase that better. The truth is, while those people who are in positions to try and right this ship, and by ship, I mean society at large, there is a small subset of people, and I think Jace is among them, who are working and making decisions and trying to make right what is the insanity we're existing in right now. I honestly think pop culture is less important because pop culture is kind of ridiculous to them right now. There's real things that need to be decided and real things that need to be done. However, I think that population is a very small segment of the rest of us. The rest of us, 95%, are told to shelter in place, and we're bored at home. And the idea that entertainment is more important to us is absolutely true, because there's nothing else to do. We're tired of looking at each other. We're tired of sitting in our backyard in our lawn chairs. So, yeah, it's more important to us.
I think that there would be a much greater loss, even though this is a terrible time, even though people are losing their lives literally, and a lot of people across the planet have died. I think that this would be too much to bear if we didn't have something to distract us. Now, you can make an argument for, well, your family should be the distraction, and yes, possibly it should. You could talk about, books or learning a skill. I've heard people being complaining, if you're not doing something to better yourself. Sometimes the best you can do in times of despair is to just make it through, and making it through is the victory. So to use these the entertainment that we are fortunate to have at our fingertips to make it through, I don't think there's, first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but second of all, I think that it is a huge luxury and blessing, for lack of a better word. And it does also prove, not just entertainment wise, but for the economy and culture at large, how important it is that internet be a utility and something that is not regulated and controlled. It should be as free to us, and I use the term free as a liberty, not necessarily without cost, as things like plumbing and electricity. These are things that are necessary for our infrastructure, necessary for our economy to survive, necessary for our culture to thrive. So we happen to have a pandemic at a time when the coping mechanisms are readily available to us, but it should prove to us a couple of things. First of all, that our art is important to us and it should continue to be funded and we should give it thumbs ups, but also that we need to have this medium of internet as a publicly protected utility.
I think the idea of art, like on a grand scale, I think we were originally just talking like movies and games, but art as a whole, I think it's important for a culture, but I do think that's one of those things that is important for a culture in a certain setting. When a culture is faced with a dire threat, like that's one of those things that it's stymied. It becomes less important in the face of that dire threat. When a culture finds itself safe again, it tends to re-embrace those things. I don't necessarily think that those things should disappear in the face of this particular pandemic. In fact, I think they've helped a lot of us through it, but I do think we should appreciate what a luxurious position we're in to enjoy them in this particular global situation. We're facing something unprecedented in a technologically unprecedented time, and have access to things that our ancestors in such a situation would never have. It's unique.
That it is. And in uncertain times, regardless of how you feel about the people in the entertainment industry, we do appreciate those that are doing what they can to keep us all as happy and healthy as we can be while we're locked up at home. Thank you, DoorDash and other delivery workers. I would not be fed without you. It's tea time. Here's a little question for you guys. What is your all-time favorite story setting? Whether it's roleplay, a movie, a book, etc. You're a good pirate? Are you drawn in by the wonders of fantasy? Do you prefer science fiction or science fantasy? Is it something like steampunk that just really gets to you?
So I have two very different answers to this, I think. I've always been a sucker for high fantasy. To be frank, The Lord of the Rings is my absolute favorite long story. It's a trilogy. I also include The Hobbit in that. It is in and of itself just one of the most superb fantasy stories I've ever enjoyed. The Lord of the Rings trilogy movies are my favorite movies of all time. Yada yada. It really is a fantastic just setting for a story to be told in. That said, I am a sucker for real world apocalypse, world ending stories as well. I found, though, during our current global situation, I'm less a fan of those because they make my anxiety go through the roof. But outside of our current situation, I do dig those too, but high fantasy has got to be my go-to.
I think I'm a sci-fi nerd. I really, really like science fiction gaming, science fiction reading, science fiction TV and movies. It's my fave. Sci-fi, I will say, with depth is certainly what I prefer, though, not just sci-fi. That stuff doesn't do a whole lot for me. But, something that has a message set in the future, far future, is always gonna catch my attention. Always has, ever since I've been a small person.
I've liked sci-fi. I think it's like super thoughtful. I think I agree. Like I've seen sci-fi that's like Warhammer 40K. I mean, that's fun to a certain point, but it isn't anything that captures my interest. But Star Trek, let's say The Next Generation, not Picard, has captured my interest.
I'll admit, I don't even really know if I have a set genre. I just know that there's like 3 checkpoints. And that's if it has gays, if it has magic, and if it has dragons. And if you have all 3, I'm sold. I don't care how bad the writing is or the cliches of the rest of the plot.
Did you say
what was your first word?
Yeah, basically if it's LGBT friendly or inclusive
if
fiction.
It has gays, that's what you said?
That's what I thought you said.
I couldn't
Bring
tell
on
if it
the
was gays or
gays.
guys, but I was unsure.
It needs to be fabulous.
So as long as there are rainbows in the mythology, good to go.
If you can give me the frickin' princess rescued from the tower, but it's lesbians and they fly away on the dragon at the end, like, I'm sold. That's it.
I was
A
just
simple person.
talking earlier about what a fan of lesbians I thought Jace would be.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not going
I'm
back
very
to this
supportive.
conversation while we're on
I'm
it.
very supportive.
I'm a fan. Okay, let me preface this because I'm gonna come off maybe not the best. I love stories that are inclusive, and I love the idea of stories that break boundaries. I don't like when they're shoehorned in, and I don't like when like stories are force-fed around the inclusion of what are unrealistic narratives. Like, I don't know. I've seen a couple of what I thought were really inclusive and really cool shows, like kind of go in weird directions. To simply have quote inclusion, but at the expense of their own lore and at the expense of their own story. And it kind of bugs me. Like I wish that kind of inclusion could be something that is more just organic to the story. Like, don't make it about that inclusion necessarily. Just have that inclusion be an organic part of the story. It feels better that way, and I think it encourages inclusion better that way.
Yeah, that's true. We would hate to have a story that's all around a straight romance. Imagine. I hate when they shoehorn in straight romances, and make the whole story about people falling in love.
I do too.
I love Could Conquer Mountains. Do you know each other's middle names?
Is
Just,
there a Brokeback Mountain we're talking about?
I wrote
just
that.
asking.
No one believes me.
Oh god, alright, that's gonna be an edited segment. If you'd like to submit a tea time question for the podcast, head on over to sokangaming.com/sokanmedia and find the submission bar on the right-hand side of the page. These questions can be anything from would you rathers to just trying to get me to say a really weird word. I'm sure to mispronounce it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Sokan Podcast. For more Sokan Media, you can visit us at sokangaming.com/sokanmedia, follow our Twitter at Sokan Gaming, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sokan Gaming Community. And look for future episodes of the podcast on Google Podcasts and iTunes. Until next time, I've been T.
I'm always Jace.
I'm always Leo.
We definitely want you to tweet us pictures of your quarantine haircuts, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, stay classy, Sokan.
Thank you for listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Craving more? Visit us on Twitter and YouTube at Sokan Gaming, as well as our website, www.sokangaming.com. Until next time, stay classy. Right, Jace?